Member for Point-a-Pierre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before we broke for tea, I was making a point that these joint select committees, I had the pleasure of sitting on the Insurance Joint Select Committee chaired by the member for Diego Martin Northeast. And also I am part of the Joint Select Committee for Energy. And the members really allows all members to participate, hear them, and at the end of the report, like in the insurance, it was a consensus. It was a 3/5 that was required. When we came to the House here, we had no issue. The opposition supported the insurance bill and the report, and all went well. So, Madam Speaker, as being a member in the fourth session, that started in the fourth session on this joint select for the Private Security Bill 2019, we really had some good, and I would say some healthy discussions in several of those meetings. In the fourth session, we held 11 meetings, and I have the minutes of those meetings. And really and truly, opposition at any point in time would have at least have had 2 members present at all times in all those 11 meetings in the fourth session. It is unfortunate that when the fourth session ended and the work of the committee was saved and carried over into the fifth session, the first meeting, which was, I think, was on 7th of November, 2019, which was no different than our first meeting that we had on June 26, 2019, where you, Madam Speaker, would have come and set the tone of nominating a chairman and so forth. And as the member from Oropuch East would have mentioned in his presentation, that after you left, the chair, the member for Laventille West, took the chair for 13 minutes, and everything was okay, and told the committee that he would send the final report to Parliament. The 7th of November, I think, was on a Wednesday, and on Friday the report was laid in Parliament. And if you have to reflect back on the minutes of the second minutes in the fourth session, where the committee was promised by the chairman that before the final report is laid, all members of the committee would have gotten 7 days to review that report, discuss it among ourselves, and what we were hoping to achieve, I was hoping to achieve, that when that final report comes to Parliament, it would have been a signed-off report by all members because it would have been agreed upon, and it would have sent a good message, a good signal to the Parliament and to the country, Madam Speaker. But that didn't happen. Madam Speaker, this bill, this report that's in front of us that has the private security bill requires a 3/5 vote majority. And when you look at the different clauses of that bill that was discussed in the committee, and it's in here in this report, the clauses, the 4 or 5 of the Constitution affects clauses 49 and 59 of this bill. 28, 29, 49, and 59, as I mentioned. And those clauses are very serious clauses in respect of the erosion of the rights of citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, the member for Port of Spain, St. Anne's West, made mention in his debate the definition of peace enforcement officer. Now, when we were back in the fourth session and in the committee stages, the committee had a problem with trying to come up with a definition of what was meant by the peace enforcement officer. At the time, the chairman, the member for Laventille West, was not too sure of the definition or the interpretation of how it was defined in the bill as opposed to the reality in Trinidad and Tobago. And it was only after other meetings, other committee meetings, that we engaged the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, and he was able to give us some clarification that this peace enforcement officer is similar to the security that protects the bands at carnival time. And I will say a little bit more on that because those groups of individuals that I hired on carnival, the 2 days of carnival, to protect the masqueraders in the particular bands, again, that is being regulated as part of this bill, Madam Speaker, and we had issues with that, and it needed some more fleshing out at committee stage, Madam Speaker, because those individuals that provide that service, the 2 days of Monday and Tuesday of Carnival, is of a very short, temporary nature. And a lot of the band owners really would pull these workers or these security individuals from all throughout Trinidad and Tobago to give them, as they say, a 2-day short-term work, Madam Speaker. And we had serious issues with that as far as tying that in to this private security bill. I want to also agree, Madam Speaker, that in all the discussions that we have had at the committee stages, all the meetings that we have had, I want to agree again with the member for Oropouche East, when we always felt that while we were going through clause by clause, that it was like wrong one and would have to come back and really bring stakeholders in front of us, especially small and medium-sized security firms, to hear their views and to assist or understand what are their concerns, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we do agree, the opposition does agree that the private security industry requires regulation. I think that is a given, but it is how we approach the regulation of that industry, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when you go through the different clauses of the bill that was part of the report, it really, and that is why I keep saying that a lot of work still had to be done at the committee stage, because the bill impacts the security service operators, the proprietary security organization, security officers, special security officers, the Private Security Service Review Council, Madam Speaker, offenses and penalties, and then you had Schedules 1, 2, and 3, the Code of Conduct of Security Officers, the Code of Conduct of Security Owners of companies, Madam Speaker, and really and truly, a critical piece of legislation like this, as a member for Oropouche East had mentioned, 30 years in the making, that another month or two would not be unreasonable for the chairman to continue the work. And he did do good work. We did do good work. I mean, our sessions at the committee stage were very long sessions as compared to other committee members. We would have maybe some days we would have had 3-4 hour committee meetings, because it required the kind of work on this particular piece of legislation, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, it's a lot more work that has to be done. And I am still in awe why the member for Lamberton West would have wrapped up or ended prematurely the report or discussing the bill. Madam Speaker, I just want to go back to what the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, when we refer to the Estate Police Association, Madam Speaker. And the Estate Police Association is a critical association that would be affected by this piece of legislation, Madam Speaker. And that is why they took the time and care to submit a 50-page document, Madam Speaker. And if one was to go through this document, which I did, I felt that they should have been given a hearing, a one-on-one hearing, without other security firms and other associations in front of the committee, Madam Speaker. Because they are a different kind of association, a different kind of situation as compared to the private security owners, Madam Speaker. And they had made several recommendations. And while they would have submitted it in writing, it would have been nice to be able to discuss it with them, one-on-one with the committee. And I think they would have felt happy in doing that, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when the member for Oropouche East was talking about members of the board, the makeup, the composition of the board, some of the recommendations by the EPA of the different type of individuals they would have liked to see the composition of the board. They mentioned it is proposed, and I quote here on page 13 of their document, it is proposed that the constitution of the statutory board be amended to include a suitably qualified person from the Occupational Safety and Health Authority, Madam Speaker. And the member of each had mentioned that, but he was chastised for mentioning something like that by the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West. The EPA also recommended a member who include a suitably qualified person from the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, Madam Speaker. They also mentioned and recommended that they also have sitting on that board a qualified person from the Equal Opportunity Commission. And I think if I try to understand why they would want a member on that from the Equal Opportunity Commission to sit on that powerful board, Madam Speaker, is to bring equality and fairness to the security guards, the security men and women who would have been under the ambit and the watch and license by the board, Madam Speaker. They also had mentioned that it's proposed that the Constitution of the Territory will be amended to include a representative from JTUM, Joint Trade Union Movement, and a representative from the National Trade Union Center. So Madam Speaker, they were looking at a holistic composition of boards from all walks throughout Trinidad and Tobago, walks of life, profession, etc., Madam Speaker. And it would have been nice to have them in front of us to hear and be able to discuss with them, Madam Speaker, their concerns. Now, Madam Speaker, they did a very comprehensive clause-by-clause analysis of the bill and their concerns. And one of their major concerns was the protection of the workers, the protection of the security men and women of this country that would have fallen under this new piece of legislation, Madam Speaker. Because I heard both members, Laventille West and the member for Port of Spain, North St. Anne's West, talked about the exploitation of workers and this piece of legislation supposed to protect them. Madam Speaker, in all our deliberations at the committee stage on the GSC, we did not have the time, and we were hoping, my other members, we were hoping that one of those meetings would have been able to flesh out and discuss the issues of workers' rights, insurance compensation, the type of insurance that the security guard would have been covered, etc., Madam Speaker. And that did not happen, Madam Speaker. So there were a lot of stuff, Madam Speaker, that had to continue. Madam Speaker, when you look at the different clauses in this committee report, Madam Speaker, when you look at it, I just want to go down to clause 78, page 39, Madam Speaker, of this report. Clause 78 says, and it's about in the area, using security services in contravention of the Act. Madam Speaker, 78 says, 78.1, no person shall utilize or obtain a security service listed under Part 1 of Schedule 3 unless he is satisfied that the provider of the service is licensed to provide that service. Now, what that talks about, Madam Speaker, is that you have individuals who might hire their own security guard. And this is where we have had an issue, and it needed to be fleshed out, that those individuals who hire their own security guard to protect their homes now fall under the ambit of this piece of regulations, Madam Speaker. And the offenses and fines that goes along with if those individuals, those homeowners or business owners, do not carry out the proper rules and procedures as designated here, would it be fined and is very onerous. It's like, I think sometimes 5 years in jail and so forth, Madam Speaker. So we needed to flesh out that sort of, those areas that we had some concerns with, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, overall, the bill in itself, as I said, it requires a lot more work. We agree with the regulations, Madam Speaker, and we felt that a lot more could be done. Madam Speaker, I don't propose to hold us much longer, but I would feel, and I would agree with my member from Overbridge East, that right now, in this way that the report is done and presented before us, we have issues with it, and we would like it to go back to a committee stage so that we can finish the good work that was started, Madam Speaker. With those few words, I thank you.
Member for Derby O'Meara.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. I thank you for this opportunity to contribute to this debate as a member of the Joint Select Committee to consider and report on the Security Industries Bill 2019. This is a long overdue piece of legislation, Madam Speaker, as this industry needs regulation. It's an industry filled with exploitation of workers. It's a low-paying industry, and it's an industry where workers work very long hours for very little pay. I want to commend the member for Lavantil West for his enthusiasm, his dedication, the energy he put out, and he placed into the work of this committee. I really want to commend him. He did a lot of work in terms of this committee. As everyone said, we had about 11 meetings. And the contribution from the member from Oropuch, he speaks of this bill being fraught with excessive bureaucracy. But this is an industry that requires a measure of bureaucracy for it to run smoothly. So I am not too sure I support him on his perspective that there's excessive bureaucracy in this industry. The member for Lavantil West had a dynamic methodology to work through these 11 meetings of this committee. He invited the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel to provide a legal interpretation of the bill. He engaged the stakeholders in public meetings and in written submissions. And he also invited submissions from the public. In the public hearings, we had the Association of Security Companies of Trinidad and Tobago, we had the Estate Police Association, and we had Amalgamated Security Services attend the public hearings. So I find that the Member of Parliament for Point-a-Pierre is disingenuous and really playing to the public gallery, because I see members of the EPA here. Because they were invited to give written submission. He himself says that the submission was about 50 pages, and they attended the public hearing, and they were allowed to contribute. What he didn't say, obviously it was in his mind, and he didn't put it towards the committee, is that he wanted them to return for a one-on-one meeting. And for the life of me, I can't understand why he didn't bring this to the attention of the committee. Again, in his mind as well, he seems to want to discuss workers' rights and exploitation and low wages, etc. But he didn't bring it to the members of the committee. The key to this committee was the matrix put together by the CPC. Because in this matrix, at every meeting, adjustments were made, corrections were made, additions were made, subtractions were made to the matrix, and then in the next meeting, the updated matrix would come again, and then we'd go through the whole process and we deal with whatever meant to be dealt with, and it would be updated over and over for each meeting. So there was a continuous dialogue between all members of the committee and continuous interpretation by the CPC for the issues that came up. And then there are quite a number of issues that came up during the course of the meeting. And again, for the life of me, I can't understand my colleagues on the other side, because not all meetings were chaired by the member for Laventille West. The independent Senator Paul Richards chaired some of the meetings, and they were in the absence of the chairman, and we all had lots of discussions, and we dealt with all the issues that came up. One area that we needed to deal with was in terms of definition, and the definition of private security industry came up. What we felt the first definition was inadequate. The CPC went and came up with another definition because we felt that it didn't cover all aspects of the industry. So we included the aspects of the industry that dealt with electronic security. Those with CCTV, access control, and vehicle location. They were included. And the definition that we finally settled upon was the private security industry means the industry which offers or provides security services and includes security service operators, proprietary security employers, special security officers, and security officers. That is the definition we settled on. And we broke it down into 5 different categories of officers: private security officers, special security officers, close protection officers, peace enforcement officers that your other members mentioned, and private investigators. In terms of the officers, there's a lot of debate and discussion in terms of the minimum level of qualification and training for officers and confidentiality of these officers, because we felt that if an officer is a close protection officer, where he is in close proximity to a major player, he would be privy to a lot of confidential discussions, confidential matters, phone calls, etc. So there was a need to look at the confidentiality, and a clause was examined and put in place to deal with the confidentiality of these officers. And we also look at the code of conduct, and adjustments were made to the code of conduct as well. There was also need, and we addressed it, and we spoke about punitive measures in terms of officers fail to adhere to the standards and qualifications. And the punitive measures for failure by security officers and special security officers to adhere to the standards and guidelines. So we put in punitive measures for those who would break their code of conduct. Another area that had a lot of discussion and took several meetings to conclude was the role of the inspectors. And mainly because it was felt that these inspectors would have to enter into private property. And there was a lot of concern about these inspectors having the ability to go into private dwellings, and it was decided that they would have to create inventory of items that they remove or requisitioned. And again, just like the officers, sanctions, personal sanctions will be placed against those who overreach the authority. And of course, we also looked at suitably qualified officers, not just on the board, but in terms of the inspectors and in terms of the officers. And the clause 29 that we finally decided upon, an inspector may, during normal working hours, conduct a random inspection of a proprietary security employer and security officers and special security officer and employee of that proprietary security employer for the purpose of monitoring the compliance of the proprietary security employer, the security officers, and special security officers with this Act, guidelines, and standards. 2, an inspector shall not enter any building or part thereof in actual use as a dwelling without the consent of the occupier except under the authority of a warrant issued under subsection 3. So we went into detail in terms of these inspectors to ensure that they complied with the law and that they didn't abuse their power, especially when they were dealing with private property, entering into people's private dwelling. So the clause 5 says an inspector authorized under subsection 4 to enter a building or part thereof shall, if so required, produce evidence of the authority before entering the said, and shall not enter the building or part thereof unless 24 hours notice of the intended entry has been given to the occupier. So we looked at officers, we looked at inspectors, we looked at firearms. We said that all the companies involved who have firearms must ensure that the firearms are in good working condition, that they are secured at all times. We even went, and as mentioned by some of the other players, to look at the dog handlers. And we agreed that legislation should stipulate that handlers of dogs adhere to the stipulations of the Dog Control Act and receive the prescribed training in the control of dogs. And we also think that the dogs should be well taken care of, healthy, etc., as the case may be. So we looked at that as well. So I feel that the committee took a comprehensive, detailed investigation into this entire act so that we would look after the interests of those involved in the act in terms of, especially, it is a low, as I say again, it's a low-paying industry with long hours, but also we look at the other citizens who would be impacted by the officers and the inspectors, the door handlers, as the case may be, so that their interests would be adhered to. We look at drug testing and background screening of the officers involved. And it was felt that a percentage of the workforce should be drug tested. Section 36, clause 7 says, the security service operator shall cause a drug test to be conducted annually in the prescribed manner on a random selection of not less than 10% of the security officers and special security officers employed. So we looked at drug testing of the operatives, and a percentage of the force should be drug tested. And clause B said, cause a drug test to be conducted in the prescribed manner on a security officer or special security officer and his employee, where there are reasonable grounds to suspect that the officer is under the influence of alcohol, dangerous drugs, and any other substance which may impair his ability to perform his duties. Again, this is an industry that deals with different types of security officers. close protection officers, security officers, and officers under the influence of drugs, whether it is alcohol or such, could be detrimental to the people they are sworn to protect. We also look at licenses. We agree that no general license should be approved. No license, no across-the-board license should be approved. But license will delineate the actual category of service and the category of products. In the case of somebody having to wait 6 months for a license, it was felt that a temporary license for a period of 3 months should be issued, and after 3 months, this temporary license could be revoked or it could be made permanent after 3 months. So we looked at the issue of license. So rather than somebody waiting 6 months to get a license, we looked at different jurisdictions where temporary license was provided, and we agreed that temporary licenses should be provided for the operators. The Estate Police Association that my friend from Pointe-à-Pierre seemed to engage, I know that they are here in the public gallery, and they participated. As I said again, they sent in their written submissions. They participated in the public meeting, and I believe that if the members on the other side wanted us to engage them further, they should have said so. And I didn't see any problem, and I would have supported an additional meeting, as the case may be, if we wanted to go on a one-on-one with the Estate Police Association. I felt it would have been a good idea, because they had a lot of concerns. Again, as I say, it's a low-paying industry, long hours, and I felt that the committee would have spent the time to deal specifically with the Estate Police Association and their concerns. Shortfalls. I felt there were some shortfalls. The registration of the and these were corrected, especially because of the matrix. The registration of the proprietary security and the MTS, they had been omitted, and they were included. And we look at the insurance requirements of the security companies. Because obviously in an industry like this, there would be claims against false arrest and the abuse of force. Especially when you deal with close protection, you deal with security officers, sometimes the tempers get, out of hand. Sometimes, again, as the member for St. Anne's mentioned, these people work Carnival Day in terms of security and etc., and with alcohol around, tempers flare. And we looked at the insurance requirements for the companies so that false arrest could be dealt with, as well as the abuse of force. The lack of members on the Private Security Authority Board for ASCOT and the other security companies and the EPA, OSHA, these were discussed. And if the members on the other side needed further discussions, I am of the opinion that they just needed to bring it to the attention of the chairman and the members of the committee, and time would have been given to them. So, Madam Speaker, as a member of the committee, I felt that the meetings was very productive. I must say that I was impressed with the professionalism of the CPA and the matrix that they produced week after week, allowing us, the CPC, and my apologies, and week after week, allowing us to make adjustments, allowing us to revisit things that we thought we had passed, and we would go back and visit and revisit them and discuss them. I felt that the methodology used by the member for Untitled West was adequate, and it helped us come to the conclusions of this committee. So in concluding, I would like to once again thank the member for Untitled West on the enthusiasm, the energy placed into this committee, and I would hope that the members on the other side would have brought up the issues if they had problems with it, so that we could have dealt with it at the committee stage. And I thank you.
Leader of the House?
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the House do now adjourn. Sorry, I beg to move that the House do now adjourn to Friday, the 13th day of March at 1:30 p.m. Madam Speaker, at that time we will do the real estate agents bill.
Honorable members, there's one matter that qualifies to be raised on the motion for the adjournment of the House. I will now call upon the member for Tabakit.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I thank you for allowing me the opportunity once again to bring another matter which I think is of national and international importance for the attention of the government and I think for all citizens, given the fact that the government created an avenue for Venezuelan refugees or migrants or what have you to come into the country and to be registered. Madam Speaker, as you recognize now, I've been bringing these social issues before the Parliament. I spoke at one time about the ADHD and ADD for children. I'm now doing research, Madam Speaker, to see how well the Ministry of Education has in fact implemented the recommendations of the Parliament. I brought the matter of violence, unacceptable rate of violence against children. Today, I am bringing this matter of the education of migrant children from Venezuela and the social and economic obligations, roles and responsibility of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, it's a very big topic, and 10 minutes is a short time in which to say something. But I think my objective is to bring these matters back into the national space, and I think it's important to do that. Madam Speaker, I bring this matter also against the background that it has international implications for us as a country, given us having international obligations under the Geneva Convention on the Status of Refugees and the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Madam Speaker, among the commitments is the obligation, or if you wish to use the word commitment, to provide access to public education to all children, regardless of their legal status, and access to legal work by refugees. However, Madam Speaker, in an article published internationally, Refugees International it's called, by Melanie Tuff on the 27th of January 2019, entitled Forced into Illegality, Venezuelan Refugees and Migrants in Trinidad and Tobago, there's a paragraph which sums up the predicament of the migrant children from Venezuela. And let me just say, Madam Speaker, according to the research I have been doing, there are about approximately 5,000 Venezuelan migrant children in Trinidad and Tobago at this time. And most of these are not being educated in any formal sense. In fact, some are not getting any education at all. Madam Speaker, the absence of, this is the quotation from the article, the absence of refugee legislation and migration policy, the inability to work legally, the threat of detention, and the lack of access to public education for refugee children will result in constant fear and hopelessness about the future for Venezuelans living here. The moment we opened our doors to the Venezuelan migrants and refugees, we came under, I believe, a moral obligation in order to provide certain services for them. I know that they go to the medical services, to the hospitals and so on, but I think the future of these children is imperiled, especially if they do not have a foundation in terms of their education. Because one of the questions I would like to raise with the Ministry of National Security and the government is this. If you have registered them and you are saying that they have 1 year in Trinidad, are you really going to send them back? What is going to happen at the end of that year? And if for 1 year, those children in their very formative years are not given the opportunity for education, what is going to happen to them? Madam Speaker, according to the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, every child should be able to get an education despite their status. And UNICEF has published a document entitled A Child is a Child, which outlines and calls for increased collective efforts by government, by communities and the private sector to provide uprooted children with access to education and health services, to shelter, to nutrition, and also sanitation. In other words, as participants, us as a country, in the work of the UN and signatory to several UN resolutions defending human rights and the rights of the child, we must accept that a child's migration status should never be a barrier to accessing basic services. Madam Speaker, I'd like to place on record, I think the appreciation of everyone in Trinidad and Tobago to organizations like Is There Not a Cause, ITNAC, an active NGO, launched a year ago a 1-year school program for children of Venezuelan migrants on August 6, 2019, and it was an initiative called the Learning Space to school some 100 children from toddlers to teenagers. Their concern is finances and volunteers. But I think that the efforts of Darumain Migrant Support, LAMS, currently serves 80 children and has a waiting list of over 50 more. There are lots of Venezuelan children that go to school in South Trinidad. The group is attempting to fill the gap that the government, I believe, has, in a sense, left open. The government has left open. However, they are facing the ineptitude of the current administration. This organization, Darumain Migrant Support, has applied for NGO status since April 2019. And my latest information is that they have not gotten it as yet. But what this has done, it is actively hindering them from receiving grants from institutions such as the US Embassy and otherwise. Look, we are putting ourselves in the country in a very bad light. Amnesty International has been pleading with the government to assist in the education of these children. Now, we have had some negative kinds of statements being made. For example, by the president of Tutor, Lindsley Dudai, in 2019. He raised concerns about the difficulty of locals to get into their children into schools. And he thought that, the first priority then should be the local children. And then we had a situation where the Minister of National Security made a very interesting statement. At a June 6 media briefing, the Honorable Prime Minister said, if the Catholic Church in its pastoral work gets involved with trying to educate children who are not going to school, that is acceptable in Trinidad and Tobago. But the Minister of National Security, Mr. Young, cautioned at the same briefing, there is no guarantee of space in our schools. Our first priority is educating our nationals. Now, I want to know, where is the policy then? Is it that they are not going to be given a space in school, or what have you? If not, then why not work with the NGOs to make sure that the children get some kind of education? If that is what you have in the short run, why not strengthen the NGOs who are willing to do this work? Why not strengthen the Catholic Church, who seems to have a very, very deep interest in doing this pastoral work? But another stumbling block is that access to public school education in general has been stymied by the inability of these Venezuelan parents to obtain a student permit from the Immigration Department for their children. And this is coming from Rochelle Nakid, coordinator of the Living Water Community Ministry to Migrants and Refugees. Living Water is, of course, UN Refugees Agency's local partner. Madam Speaker, in addition to that, you have a situation where LAMS, again I make the appeal, applied for NGO status, they are not getting it. Now, the things are going on locally. On November 18, 2019, the Guardian newspaper reported that the United National Children Fund partnered with the Living Water Community to provide 600 Venezuelan migrant children with tablets so that they can pursue their education in Trinidad. And they were also to be used as part of a blended online face-to-face institution program certified by the Caribbean Examination Council, CXC. They did that because the Minister of Education as quoted in the article, said the children could not be accommodated in the public school system. Madam Speaker, I think that this is a very serious situation, a really, really very serious situation, and one that, you know, somebody has to pay attention to. Somebody has to pay attention to this. We just cannot hide from this problem. We have accepted these people in the country as migrants. These children are in a very difficult situation. Madam Speaker, I can take you to a couple of homes in the village of Faizabad, where 6 and 7 children in a home between the ages of 1 and 8 are not going to school at all. In some cases, I'm trying myself now to provide a teacher who will work along with a parent, Spanish and English, to see if you can at least put some basic learning into these children, because, you know, I see their future being very imperiled because of this. Madam Speaker, there are lots of buildings that are empty right now. Some of them were to be built as ECC centers. Why can't the government allow some of these NGOs to use them in order to educate these children and perhaps educate other children side by side? In my own constituency of Gasparilla, there's one there, and it's now covered by grass and covered by vines and so on. There's one in Waterloo. There are activity centers that have been built in the country that are closed simply because the government wouldn't put electricity in them and what have you and so on, that can be used in order to show that we have a social conscience in this country, that we have a social responsibility. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to respond to the member from Tawakit. Madam Speaker, the first point I want to make is that we must clear our minds with respect to the difference between migrant children and refugees. The policy or the position of this government is that these children are regarded as migrant children. They are not regarded as refugees. And therefore, in dealing with these children, our process must be different from dealing with refugees. That's the first point I want to make. And I think the member for Tabakit, in his presentation, confused the issue between migrant children and refugees. He mixed them up, and there's a clear distinction, Madam Speaker. Secondly, every person in this country was well aware of the position of this government on this issue. It was made clear from the very beginning that our priority had to be given to children, to nationals, children who are nationals of this country. We never for one moment said that we are going to deny these migrant children of an opportunity to access education. What we said is that priority must be given to our children. And again, the member for Tabakit is misconstruing the position of government. Madam Speaker, he spoke about why don't we give NGOs the opportunity to educate these children. I want to re-emphasize that in our school system, there are two types of schools. We have the government schools and we have the denominational schools. We have what is referred to as a dual system in our education, where the church plays an important part. Madam Speaker, I have been having discussions with the Catholic board as high up as the Archbishop in an effort to ensure that children of migrants are given an opportunity. But at the same time, it is made clear that we cannot place this burden on the shoulders of government as though we are neglecting our position. The member for Tabakit spoke about our 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and also the United Nations position on the rights of the child. We are well aware of that, Madam Speaker, and we are working towards that. We believe that every child should have access to an education, and this is one of the pillars upon which we base our education system. And to say that we are not following this is not correct. We are fully aware of our position and of our responsibilities, and we are doing everything to ensure that our children are given the first preference. we ask the question, what is going to happen to these children after 1 year? It is expected that this situation will be reviewed. And again, the Minister of National Security has been saying this over and over. After 1 year, the situation will be reviewed. They are not here for all times. Their position here will be assessed, and on the basis of this assessment, it will decide, the government will decide our next step forward. I want to make the point again, Madam Speaker, that the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension, the Ministry of Education, is aware of our responsibilities. But at the same time, our greater responsibility must be to the children of this nation who are nationals. Thank you very much.
Honorable members, the question is that this House do now adjourn to Friday, 13 March 2020 at 1:30 p.m. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned to Friday, 13 March 2020 at 1:30 p.m.